Hi, Adam. Welcome to the Seattle Network and my podcast show to talk about amazing people like you.
Thank you, C. It's great to be here.
Okay, I need to introduce you because in a way that really gives you don't need much of an introduction. I feel like this whole freaking city knows you.
There's
But
plenty
you
of people that don't know me.
speak, they need to know you now. Like, oh my gosh. So just so everyone know how you and I have met, and because I love how we met, it was the coolest thing ever. And it was during Techstars. We're both mentors at Techstars. It was my first time doing Techstars Seattle, and we met at the get together thingy to hear all of their pitches and everything when the founders were kind of like, first and ready, and they're like about to head on to the journey until demo day. And then even on demo day, or in between that, we became really good friends, and I really always respected and how you talked about the entrepreneurship community and how you have really kind of I mean, because I see it, and it's really awesome how you've been able to create the communications and relationships across like this whole entire city. It feels like, I feel like everyone knows you, or you know everyone, and it was through the freaking 601 because you're on the board on 601, and I want you to say the tagline because I think it's so cool. So this invite only access networking club kind of thing, but what it really
No, no,
is the
it's
tagline.
601 is not nearly that fancy.
Right.
So
What's the tagline?
601 is a happy hour group that has been around for about 15 years.
Yeah.
And when people ask me what 601 is, it's real simple. It's a drinking group with a networking problem.
It's so amazing.
But but
Line.
the
Her.
the ironic thing is so
Yeah.
many people in the drinking group are now soberish, myself included. So that when I walk up to the bartender, they're like the usual, like soda
Yeah.
water and bitters. Okay, sure. So I have a happy hour group of people that are hydrating.
Oh boy. Oh boy. And then even going up to the demo day of Techstars too. And you've always been really I think a really you shine a light in every room that you're in the way of like you're like, hey, this person and that person. So you've always been kind of a connector and an intro for so many people. So thank you for your contributions in the entrepreneurship community, especially here in this city that's kind of frozen sometimes.
So I don't like to say that I'm shining a light so much as holding up a mirror
Okay.
because you know sometimes the Seattle freeze isn't that people are unfriendly, it's
No.
just they're too modest.
Yeah.
And they don't
That's a great way to put
want
it.
to, you know, hold themselves out. And so I've known a lot of people. I've been around the city for a few decades now, and I've seen how incredible some people are. And instead of shining a light, I just hold up a mirror so that they can see and the other people can see how amazing they are. And that's my networking style, is pointing out when I think people are great, and if people need something, I love connecting and doing what I can to foster and help out the entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, I mean, like, and I saw it in person too, even during the drinking days of the net, when people were drinking during the drinking part of the networking 601. It's like you were giving advice, to this woman entrepreneur, like right then and there. And it was that counsel of like giving, you're always such a, like, you always get value around you. And so I just saw that as a really great leading example. So thank you for leading by example of just being really helpful. And I think that's just really generous, not only generous, but you have this energy around you that it's like really awesome. So
Well, I'll let you in on a secret. It's because I'm greedy and selfish that I'm that generous. Because because it's always more fun to give than to receive. And so
yeah.
I get more joy from that. And also long term for business,
Mm-hmm.
people remember who has helped them
Yeah.
more than uh, people who are just out there not contributing. And
Exactly. Yeah.
and so it's just my personal practice, that if I know two amazing people and I think that they could be even better if they met, I'll try and introduce them.
Yeah.
Or if there's
Yeah.
something else that I can do in the community, happy to do that because I'm so greedy.
Okay. Let's deconstruct this just a little bit. What I mean by that is that you understand you know, with your private practice, and you've been in town for a really long time. You've been in the ecosystem for a really long time. You get business. You're an angel investor yourself. So you've been all around in the business ecosystem. I feel like obviously you know how to navigate the law. But not only that, you do really fun stuff and you do awesome patents and you know, you do trademarks for these amazing innovations that you get to see first, and that lights up your day because you're like, ha.
Look, it's I will argue that I practice in one of the best areas of law because my clients, when they come to see me, they're excited and in a good mood, and I get to help them out.
Yeah.
And by helping, I'm able to take what they've created. These are people that are solving the world's big problems, but they're afraid to share it with the rest of the world. And it's my job to, one, have the honor and pleasure of seeing these new innovations,
Mm-hmm.
like the first ones outside of their company.
Yeah.
But my job is actually just to take the fear away so that they feel comfortable sharing those creations with the rest of the world. And so
Ooh.
it's just that, um and actually, I mean, we it took a little bit of introspection with my team for us to figure out that that's what we were doing. Because we didn't exercise. So Simon Sinek,
Love him.
is talks about your why, and so
Yeah.
I was talking with my team like, what's our why? Why do we do this intellectual property stuff? And we went around the table talking about it, and we actually distilled it down to our new tagline that we've had for a few years now, which is just two words: unleashing genius. So our clients are the smart ones. I mean, all right, the patent attorneys on my team are pretty smart, but the clients are the ones that have identified the big problems, come up with the
Mm-hmm.
solutions. But these creations, these babies that these people care so
Yeah.
much about, they're afraid to share them with the rest of the world because they don't want their creation to be mistreated.
100%.
And then it's our job to build the protection for
Yeah.
those
Moat
creations.
strategy, the fortress, you know? Sorry, I went there. But
Yeah, but I mean, it is. I mean,
yeah.
whether it's a fortress or it's a bubble, or if it's just shining a spotlight so other people know that, you know, this is a creation that has been protected.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about your history in how you got into like cybersecurity and blockchain. Like help me understand, like before even practicing. I need to hear
So,
this story again because everyone needs to know because it's really brilliant and
well,
they need to hear it.
when
Tell me.
so I started off as a little kid as a computer geek. So started off in a university computer lab. Was fascinated with computers and software from early days. So I go all the way back to 1979. It was the first time I walked into a computer lab, and over the years, understanding what software could do, and then understanding what communication systems are like as the internet came online. As I got into law school, I thought there were going to be interesting issues around computer security and the law. And so when I was taking early classes in law school around, uh, well, criminal law and criminal procedure, the professor asked me to write a paper around criminal procedure. And I was like, oh, what am I going to write on? And so one of the things that I started looking at was how law enforcement was looking at digital information and what information they were gathering. Now, back back in the early 90s, people were still using cordless phones. And if you turn over an old cordless phone from the 90s, it has some text embedded in the plastic. And it says, this is an FCC Class B device, may cause interference with other radio signals, which law enforcement interpreted to mean that since you're holding a radio and you're broadcasting, then anyone with a receiver can listen in without a warrant.
Yeah.
And so law enforcement was going around cities with just scanner radios, listening in on any cordless phone conversation. If they heard something that was criminal, they would go in and bust people. And people were like, I thought you needed a warrant to wiretap. And they're like, well, you were broadcasting it on a radio, so you should have known better. Now, the law did change around that because Congress thought it was unreasonable that people didn't have privacy in those conversations. But only at that time, only wired phone lines and cell phones had an expectation of privacy. Cordless phones had zero expectation of privacy, and nobody knew anything about that. And I thought, what other areas do people not understand? And so I started looking for where people were advocating for privacy and security, and I found this very interesting discussion group. This was back in 1993, called Cypherpunks, where people were talking about cryptography and encryption algorithms, and then public policy around how the government wanted to mandate that if any encryption was going to be used, it had to have a government backdoor. So the government could always decrypt.
Wait,
anything.
was that your Columbus moment? That was like your first discovery into like your first footing into. Oh, and so that's cool.
It was that discussion group. And so those discussion groups actually had regional physical meetups. And so I was down in San Diego at the time, and I went to one of these physical meetups. And
oh my God, king of meetups, seriously.
and there were 5 of us there. And but it was a group of, computer savvy people that were like, hey, if this internet thing is gonna blossom and we're going to be able to do interesting things on the internet, like shopping or banking or communicate with people in a way that not everyone is reading it, we're going to want to have some type of privacy. And the privacy is going to come by using some technology like encryption. And so there was a lot of interesting discussion around going on in that group. And all those interactions created this very rich community. And part of the discussions were people talking about how we're going to be able to do payments online. And so in the early 80s, there'd been this guy, David Chaum, who had invented something called eCash. And early on, it looked like it was going to be a really good cash substitute, but it had some problems. One of the things about anything that's digital is that it can be copied very easily.
Yeah.
Bit for bit, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one of the problems that eCash had, is that you could copy one of the coins and you could give the copies to 2 different people. And so they thought they'd been paid. And when they went to redeem it, only the first one would get the value. So that was called the double spend problem. And so people were talking about like, how are we going to do this? And that got me interested in cryptocurrency. And when I worked on my master's in computer science, the thesis I was working on was on scalability of micropayment transactions. How can we do lots of little transactions? Like, how can we put postage on emails? Or how could we do little tiny transactions that don't have a lot of computational expense? Since there are ways of doing large payments that were available back then, but computers were so slow that processing each large payment took a lot of computing power. And that was using the public key encryption techniques that were available back then.
Wait, so you've had so much fun since then, seeing the fintech industry basically, man, just like super giddy along the years, just like seeing it all take off. Gosh.
So yeah, I was working on scalability of micropayment transactions back in 1995. But on that little privacy discussion group, Cypherpunks, that group kept on going. But, you know, early on, they were talking about how do we authenticate these transactions. And there have been some discussion on the group of this thing called time chain. Back in 1991, these Haber and Stornetta were the researchers. Those are their last names. They were thinking about, okay, if we're going to have transactions online in the future, what's one of the most important things we need to know about these transactions? And they realized that when the transaction takes place is actually going to be very important, because if it took place when there was money in the bank, then the transaction goes through.
Yeah.
But if it takes place after the money has left the bank, then the transaction should be blocked, just like the double spend problem. And so they developed this time stamping system, and their biggest innovation was realizing that you can't trust any one authority to authenticate the transactions, because any authority can be tempted into corruption.
Yep, those things.
And the bigger the transactions that you're doing online, the more risk there is of corruption.
Right.
Up to the nation state level, if it's a big enough transaction. I mean, we've seen some corrupted nation states.
Yeah, I mean, you want to keep your hard-earned money too, right? And do the things. Right. Yeah.
And so their big innovation was realizing that you could break up the authentication from having a single authenticator to a consensus of a community. And so if you have a community authentication system, then there's no one person that can be corrupted to invalidate a transaction. You would have to communicate society at large that is participating in the community. You'd have to corrupt the whole community, at which point everyone will know it's corrupted. So at that point, you've lost trust in the system anyway. And so this has come to be known as consensus. But how do you incentivize people to participate in this authentication system? Well, on this later developed blockchain, because that's what time chain became, is people realized that those little timestamps that had a block of information could hold additional things besides timestamps. They could hold other blocks of data. And so they eventually renamed time chain to become blockchain. And then there was this guy, Satoshi, who decided that, if you could build a cryptocurrency on this system by storing the tokens in the blockchain. And one way of incentivizing people to work on the consensus and authenticate the transactions is to reward them for participating in this voting consensus building process and donating their computing power. And we now know that consensus building by another name, which is mining, Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining is just participating in the community as one of the good Samaritans that's making sure that Bitcoin transactions stay valid.
That's
And
probably the
occasionally the miners
simplest
get
part. Sorry, that part right there, like, is probably the simplest explanation of what you're actually being involved in, rather than like a lot of the talks that are out there. So that's really clear to communicate in that way. And during this time, this is when you're kind of like a shadow in the night, of you're helping the communities as the community was growing, right?
well, I mean, I was, but by the time Bitcoin came around, it was such, old technology that it was uninteresting and I didn't buy any. It wasn't worth it.
Didn't.
So, oops. Sometimes being too early is not a good thing. I've since had some clients pay me in Bitcoin. So yes, I have participated, as anyone who has access to the Bitcoin blockchain can see. Because that's one of the interesting things about a blockchain is it's completely transparent. You can see all the transactions.
Yeah. So
And
how did you go from there to your professor, the whole like education side? Because it feels like you were on the realms and the internet, and then you had this meetup kind of thing happening, and then you were able to educate in that way, and it became, with your clients also being part of, some of your clients are part of having businesses in that area as well, and
well,
it's an area that you're able to specialize in.
it well, I mean, our firm specializes in a lot of things, but
Yeah.
because of my background, just practicing and being familiar with the cryptography community and the policies and the history, um, there's so much you just learn by participating in a community like that, that when some of my clients who are in the computer consulting space needed intellectual property help, they felt very comfortable coming to me. And then later on, when those clients became advisors and professors themselves, um, they asked the school to invite me to teach because they felt that I could bring a perspective around how law and computer security work together to help manage risk. And so that's how I
Awesome.
got involved in teaching.
And then you became a mentor and like all these things, and it's just amazing like how your progression has been. No, but it's true because it's a topic that is not really known, and as you know, it's like the unleashing genius of your tagline is like these people who are really in the future, in the future of like it's not really mainstream or people don't really know how to talk about it, or it is a very small selective group of highly ambitious individuals. And for them to
Well,
feel safe to talk to someone like you who has a background and it was an is whatever active participant in it, that would mean a lot. I mean, like, how would you
well,
not trust to have that conversation?
it's um, it's also having started from close to ground zero. I mean, I I missed using punched card computers by just a year or two. I mean, there were still punch cards in the computer room that I was in. It's just nobody was using them.
Yeah.
Um, I still remember when sometimes I couldn't get a video terminal and I had to use the printer terminal, where each screen, when it refreshed, would print out on another sheet of accordion fold paper. Um, and but learning the early software programming language, having programmed it actually in assembly language at the low level, and there's a hard to replicate foundation of knowledge of understanding how things work that gives me a very solid foundation and flexibility to look at different areas of computer security or
Yeah.
any of the computing technologies um, that many computer science students uh, don't get that same level of fundamental knowledge when they're leaving their programs, because who needs to program assembly now? We have so much additional memory. We have so much additional processing
All
power.
the things.
Like, why would you need to use such a primitive way of interacting between a human and a computer when there are all these higher level tools that can speed up the process and allow you to do really powerful things?
Yeah.
But when you're able to tear things down to their really basic levels, it's interesting. Because computers do exactly what you tell them to do, not what you want them to do. And if you're speaking a higher level language, you're actually not speaking the language of the computer. You're speaking something that's been translated a few times away from the actual instructions that the computer is using to operate on.
I feel like all the
And
engineers are like cheering for you right now. I just feel like this applause that's happening.
well, and so if you think that the only language that you can talk to a computer in is at these high levels that are very powerful at getting computers to do very interesting things, um, you can miss out that uh, there are people that have the ability to interact with computers in other ways that can make the computer do things that it shouldn't be doing, that you don't want it to be doing, that right now it's unethical or illegal to be doing. Um,
Yeah.
and if you put the guardrails up at one level, you got to be sure that the guardrails are at all levels. And it takes very specialized expertise nowadays for people to get that full stack of uh,
And who's policing and who's governing it and who's checking it and how to.
well, it's interesting. A few years ago, many of the people I met in the Seattle community, particularly the Seattle Startup Weekend community, which was this vibrant group of people that would come together and do hackathons, many of the people I met through that group got invited to DC. Um, during the Obama administration, there was a giant vacuuming up of talent in Seattle. Some like the top developers.
Wait to put vacuuming.
Well, no, it's like, and so and so and so there were whole new agencies and quasi-private public partnership companies that were set up to set up new ways for people and the government to interact in the at via the internet in particular.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see some of those people that are still either they have new companies that are working as government contractors, and so I'll see somebody, who used to be working out of a co-working space in Pioneer Square, you know, setting up IT infrastructure in Kabul, or
Absolutely
helping
not.
the Veterans Administration run their IT infrastructure, or Health and Human Services having a new portal. But it's um, there are a lot of people that are part of the tech and entrepreneurial community here that are actually looking to give back and make a bigger impact.
That's a great example of, because I think one of the things here also in this Emerald City is like, we have such great talent in our backyard. And I'm an advocate of, I don't want anyone to leave. To play in our backyard forever. In our secret garden, where it's so beautiful during the summer, and it's just incredibly beautiful. And but when you put it like that way, I'm like, yeah, I got bigger things to do.
Well, but even the tech companies from out of state, they realize how great the talent is here, and there are people that don't want to leave. It's a great city, and so Google has huge engineering offices here, even though they're a California company. Facebook, huge offices over here. SpaceX. I mean, people don't think of Seattle so much as a space company, although a little bit more now with Bezos's Blue Origin. But because Boeing has been in Seattle and started in Seattle, decades or may have been a century already.
Yeah, their handprint is a bit deep in all the appearances.
So, there are a lot of engineers in the area that are good at, making tin cans fly, whether it's with propellers or jet engines or rockets.
Right.
And I'm continually impressed when I go out to insert your whatever the technology vertical is. So there's the AI Tinkerers meetup around here. It has just some brilliant AI startups that are part of it. There's a space happy hour that happens.
Oh yeah. Gosh, what's his name? He's such a happy guy.
Are you talking about Craig? Yeah, Craig Barenwald. He is. And it's I certainly don't know everybody in this town, but
Sure.
I'm fascinated by how welcoming each one of the communities is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if you say the word space with an earshot of Craig, he's like, "Hey, come to our happy hour."
He is like the Mickey Mouse of like all things space and people. Like he's really awesome.
I met up with him and we were, I mean, a few years back, and we were talking about just creation of new products. We weren't talking about space in particular, since his company focuses on helping people with new products. And we work with a lot of people that are creating new products. And so it was just like, how can we help each other?
Yeah, and that's the ecosystem, right? And I think it's what you're saying is like there's the networking side of it, but then there's partnership, there's the greater ecosystem where we're all kind of working together to make sure that we're able to have really great outputs and be very valuable to be able to, whatever big project is on the table, that whoever is the genius behind the big baby idea, that they're well supported and they're well cared for, they're well taken care of. And I think it's I want to go into cybersecurity because you know how much I love about cybersecurity. We can't ignore that fact. But you have went through, from understanding where you started with blockchain and crypto, and it's so funny because you would think it's kind of like backwards, but it's like that thesis was kind of like the can of worms for you that you went straight in.
But what's funny is you say crypto and you mean something which is completely different than the crypto that I went into. Because back then, in 1993, crypto meant cryptography. No one had heard about cryptocurrency.
Fair.
And there was this pivot point sometime in the 20 teens
Mm.
when cryptocurrency had just gotten so much momentum that if you said crypto, no one even thought about cryptography. No one was thinking about the old discussions of which cryptography algorithm is the best one to use. No, they were thinking about which meme coin is the best one to buy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how did you landed yourself in the branches? Because all these different, security branches, I guess, because there's just so many areas of it, like whether if you um found yourself hanging out a lot in the healthcare realm of things or more on the fintech side of things, going and stacking on the payment processing and like, that kind of side, or is it more on truly on the data side of it? Like where did you find yourself, you know, having your balancing act of
I
helping
mean,
protect in that respect?
so I would say all of the above. I
Mm.
mean, um, or none of the above, in the sense that I've always been more interested in the platform and technology, the fundamentals of it, rather than how it's applied.
Mm. Okay.
And so, um, so I'll give you there's a specialized blockchain called Zcash, and so it's a blockchain that uses something known as zero knowledge proofs. And what a zero knowledge proof is let's say I have a secret and you are willing to pay me if I have that secret, but you're not willing to pay me if I don't possess that secret. Now, without zero knowledge proofs, the only way that you can verify if I have the secret is if I tell you,
Mm-hmm.
but then the secret is no longer secret.
Yeah.
But zero knowledge proofs are a way of algorithmically proving whether somebody has a secret or not. And Zcash allows you to do some really interesting transactions without revealing information. And it's a bit of mathematical magic, but it works, and it works really well. And once you can start trusting the technology, you can then start doing more interesting transactions much more quickly, and even having computers do those transactions and no longer have to build in this laborious trust building exercise, which is our whole life. There's that saying that
Sorry.
well, no, there's a saying that a reputation is something that takes a lifetime to build and
It's
an instant to
important.
destroy. But it can be
Yes.
destroyed in an instant. But if you have an algorithm that you can is provably trustworthy, mathematically provably as trustworthy, that that allows some really uh, interesting new possibilities of what types of new digital transactions you can do. I'll give you a fun story though. Um, there's a famous encryption algorithm called the RSA encryption algorithm, and the R, S, and A stand for three different scientists. And the R in RSA is Ron Rivest. And Ron's a brilliant cryptographer working out of MIT. One of the smartest cryptographers in the world. Some people might say the smartest. And he came up with a new algorithm. Now, historically, he'd patented many of his algorithms, but patents only last a limited number of years. So Nowadays, they last 20 years from the date you filed them. But Ron thought that this algorithm was so amazing that he would not patent it because he thought it would be valuable decades into the future, and he didn't want to be limited by the term of the patent. So he kept it as a secret algorithm. And the only way you could get it is you had to license the code from his company. The code was always pre-compiled. You had to agree that you would never try to reveal what the code was. You couldn't reverse engineer.
Or you have to pay $1 quadrillion.
Nope. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, onerous terms of service.
Yeah.
Well, one day in one of the discussion groups online, somebody published some source code.
Uh-oh.
And they said, this is the source code to Ron's algorithm. It was called, Ron's algorithm was called RC4, Ron's cipher number 4. So this is the source code to RC4. Now the company that was licensing it immediately said, you have to take that down. That's a trade secret. But the person who had published the code had published it anonymously, which was interesting because the way trade secrets work is you have to go to the person who stole the trade secret. And you need to say, you need to show that they misappropriated it. They took it without permission.
Yeah.
Or they exceeded the permissions that they had to share that information. And because it was anonymous, they couldn't prove who did it. Maybe somebody with permission did it. Maybe somebody with permission didn't. So that source code, which worked perfectly with the secret source code that you could get from RSA securities, eventually became known in the industry as ARC4, alleged RC4. And people built it into their software and used it. But fast forward a few years, and this is one of the beautiful things about the cryptography community, is the cryptography community doesn't like to have secrets on how things work. The researchers like to be able to test everything, and they actually found that there was a weakness in RC4. And in fact, it wasn't a good encryption algorithm. And in fact, that it shouldn't be used because it wasn't secure.
Oh, so at this point it's stress tested.
It was stress tested and it broke. And so there was a flaw in the algorithm. It was a really good algorithm, but it was flawed and everyone abandoned it.
Wow.
And so
humans. Sorry.
And so having to trust even the most brilliant cryptographer in the world with your cryptography is not good enough. The community is always going to be strong.
That is okay. I now even see your mirror of how you are such, your big heart in the community, and whether that's online or in person here in Seattle. And wow, it's really like,
hey, I had nothing to do with breaking RC4 or protecting it. I'm just in the room hearing the stories.
This guy. Love it. Okay, so then help me understand where we are today in, how would someone with, who should be walking into your office, Adam? Because I want to say, because if you are like
only geniuses,
okay.
Okay. Only irritated geniuses.
Ooh, that's a better one. Okay.
So the people who have looked around the world and said, there's something wrong there. There's a problem and I know how to fix it. Those are the people who need to walk into our office, because those are the people, once they figured out how to fix it, we can help them share it with the rest of the world.
Okay, so let's say I'm a really irritated, can't say the word. I'm an irritating I mean, I'm really just like, I'm at my wits and I am like, okay, I need to talk to Adam. At what stage of me, because there's a difference of being able to solve the problem and then also being as part of the business side of it. So let's say I'm the magician and I'm the technician, but then I'm also as like the CTO co-founder versus I'm a business executive, and we have really discovered, we've really pushed through at which milestone or preliminary milestone should they be like, oh shit, I gotta walk into these doors and say I'm a genius.
So, I mean, the funny thing, the smartest people are the ones who realize how much they don't know, and so they often don't think of themselves.
Well, they normalize the damn thing. Like, gosh, it's just a habit. It's like flipping a light switch for them. They're like, well, it's just like any other day.
Exactly. And so sometimes I need to hold up the mirror and say, no, this is actually a significant development.
Yeah.
But I mean, often I will tell people that at the point where they've decided that it's worth leaving their day job
to
do some technology startup.
So this is an all-in instance you're talking about.
Right.
Okay. Poker people.
There is usually something patentable there.
Mm.
Because the reason somebody leaves their day job to start a new tech company is they've spotted a gap, some type of problem that hasn't been solved.
Yeah.
Because if it hadn't been solved, they just would have bought it off of Amazon, or they would have, signed up for the SaaS monthly renewal.
Yeah. Yes. Say the quiet part out loud, Adam.
So if it was available, they would have just gotten it. But because it wasn't out there, and it was so irritating, there was such a problem, there was such a gap in the universe that they had to quit their day job to go do this. At that point, there's usually something protectable. Now, whether they protect it or not, that's up to them. You can choose to solve a problem and not protect it. And there's a rich open source community where people want to just share what they've created, and they don't necessarily want to protect it with robust proprietary intellectual property.
Okay, fair. So how about this? I'm going to give another scenario.
Yeah.
And the other scenario is I'm a hotshot investor with a portco. And I am betting my bets. And I'm in a certain area and I see the gap in the market. There are existing, but we're going to shoot them out of the water kind of thamabobber. And how would you... And they're working with an early stage team, for example.
Well, so classic question that any savvy professional investor is going to ask is, what's the barrier of entry for a fast follower? Mm-hmm. How are you going to keep people from ripping off your technology? And let me give you a real story. So we had a client. They developed groundbreaking blockchain technology. And there was another company that thought that was groundbreaking technology and created almost an identical replica.
Wow.
And the other company was VC backed.
Oh, now, okay. Thanks for setting the table here.
Now, our client knew that their technology was groundbreaking, and so they asked us to do something a little bit different. They asked us to speed up the patent process for them. And there's a new type of patent application that is just a fraction of all patent applications that are filed every year. Like there's over 500,000 patents are filed every year. About 12,000 of them are these fast track patent applications called track 1 patents. Regular patents take 3 to 4 years to go through in the software space. We got our client this patent in 3 months.
Holy fuck.
Well, the VC at the other company heard about it.
Of course. Hello.
And they said, you know what? We don't want our money being used to fend off a patent lawsuit. So they clawed their money back.
Wow.
And the competing company went away. Because they lost all of their VC funding. And later on, the VC, who happens to be a friend, came to me. He's like, Adam, why'd you do that to me? I thought I had 3 or 4 years. We could compete in the marketplace, see who would win. And I was like, look, I can't help it if you backed the wrong horse. You should have funded my client.
But these are the kind of conversations where it's like, you know, which game are you really playing in, right? And what are you really, that is awesome.
And so IP gives particularly small companies a very powerful tool to be able to stay in the marketplace. So one of my favorite analogies I like to use, because everyone gets it nowadays, is when you're playing mobile games. Most mobile games have 2 currencies. They have coins and they have gems.
Yep.
And you can always get a ton of coins for free just by playing the game. But if you want gems, you usually need to shell out real money. Or there's a horrible exchange rate for 1 million coins for 1 gem. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, dollars are like coins, patents are like gems. And so if you are going to be negotiating with another company and all you have are coins, your exchange rate when the other company has patents is going to be very expensive. And if you don't have money, if you don't have money, you can't negotiate.
You can't play. You don't have buying power.
But if you also have patents that are of interest to the other company, now you have the ability to cross-license. And you have negotiating power that you otherwise wouldn't have had as a small company. And there was a not very small company called Sun Microsystems that had a huge patent portfolio. And years ago, they started talking with Microsoft about how Microsoft was infringing some of their patents. Then Microsoft said, well, you're infringing some of our patents. And they were, you know, had the guns pointed at each other.
Modern day, this is literally war.
But instead of going to war and obliterating each other, they just cross-licensed their patent portfolios. But the littler company, Sun, had a stronger patent portfolio than Microsoft.
Ooh.
So Microsoft had to balance $3 billion in coins on the scale.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's like you should always be able to nuke in the back of your pocket, but you don't actually do that because you need to be able to do all the things. So yeah. Wow.
But that then freed up Microsoft to use all of these very cool Sun patents.
They had access.
So now that by cross-licensing, they got access to all of that. Because patents don't give you the right to be in the marketplace. Rather, they give you the right to exclude other people from the marketplace.
This is such a, thank you for clarifying it, because it's really, you don't hear this a lot, obviously, to really hear the value of patents, and then also how it's part of the discussions of where you would want it to go and where you don't want it to go, right? Because it is a lot of the investment in the actual startup or the genius itself, or whichever horse that you're betting on, is already quite the investment. And then on top of that, in the sector that you're going, in the vertical that you're going, and the competition that you're dealing with, and how there's not a lot of people in this area that are able to be, you know, competing at that level. I mean, the conversation you've been talking about, like the guy's like, yo, why did you? And it's not personal, but it's business, right? And so it's really awesome how you're able to storytell it in a way that is really understandable for both sides of the players, right? Whether it is the founder or whether it's the investor, to be able to have this common conversation. So this is really important because it's not something that, you're really thinking about 24 months from now or even 3 years from now. And you're because they're so busy building something. And like you said, they're building something so amazing, but they're already trying to balance everything out to learn how to be a entrepreneur, learn how to be in the in and outs of that on top of being innovative and not burning out and being able to deal with people. We love people management, and and anything else that is external that is beyond their control. But then the reality of the game, if you're saying you're looking out like almost like a board game, it's like, well, there's this territory and then this territory, and how to actually see it, to have, you're giving the ammo and the tools to be able to have a proper conversation for someone to bring it to their next boardroom conversation. So
exactly.
Adam, thank you for sharing that, because that is just like, people are probably like, I have never had that conversation before, or we touched that. Was that what they were talking about? Is that why we're trying to gun it in this way? Because sometimes the pressure that's coming from investors to founders, sometimes they don't know why it is, kind of thing. And sometimes I feel like the relationship or the interpersonal skills can be a little bit strained sometimes. Maybe it's having these open conversations can help as to what to bring to the table, to if a discussion even has happened or will happen, being in that vertical.
Yeah. We're very pro entrepreneur. I mean, we really want to champion those geniuses that are solving the world's problems. And so we view ourselves as providing the tools so that they can have the space to keep creating and keep solving the world's problems.
Let me ask you a different question.
Sure.
Just so if someone didn't get that, when would it be too late that I didn't walk into your office? When is it too late? So we talked about when is the right time to walk into your office, but when is it too late?
So there's two too lates. So on the patent side, there's a deadline in the US, and then there's an international deadline, because patents are territorial. If you want protection in the US, you get a US patent. If you want protection in Canada, you get a Canadian patent. You want protection in Australia, you get an Australian patent. An Australian patent does no good in the US, does no good in Canada. Now, in the US, as soon as you publicly reveal your invention, or if you offer it for sale, a 1-year clock starts ticking. And if you wait for 1 year from that public release of information, boom, you lose your patent rights. You've waited too long. It's too late. We can't help you. Now, other countries around the world are on what are known as a pure first-to-file system. So whoever files the patent first gets it, which means that if anybody talks about the patent or the invention before filing a patent, poof, everybody loses patent protection. No one can ever get a patent on that invention. So the best practice is, if you do invent something that you might want to protect somewhere in the world besides the US, talk to me first. At least have the conversation. Because we're always willing to give people 15 minutes just to ask the questions. No charge. Come on in, or give me a call. We'll hop on Zoom. 15 minutes, ask the questions. Ask when does it make sense? And we'll let people know. And I've had to break some hearts where somebody waited 2 years. They're like, oh, I'm going to wait till my startup is successful and has gotten traction. And then they've gotten successful, built up the idea, got traction, and they gave the invention away to the public.
Yeah.
So, um, the US grace period is actually quite dangerous in
Okay.
that the US grace period is uh, protects you for that 1 year period in which to file a patent, but the US is first inventor to file. So if your disclosure is somewhat different from somebody else who has a similar invention, but they might be able to get a invention filed. You might be able to file for a patent application while you're still waiting on your grace period. And if your disclosure doesn't destroy all of their invention, they might end up with a patent and you'd end up with nothing.
Ouch.
Um, and so, and internationally, also, whoever files first, um, so one, keep it secret, but don't wait too long, because I've seen independent people invent the same things almost simultaneously. So we had a case where we went to Europe and two people filed the same invention on the same day.
Did they meet each other at the airport? Like they must.
No, but it turned out that our US client had filed the patent application first, and we were able to use the US filing date to get priority over the other one.
I see. Wow. That close.
But sometimes, like, when society brings us new problems and people start noticing the problems at the same time and working on the solutions at the same time. But it also happens. So one of my favorite examples of this is one of our artist clients. So this wasn't patent, it was copyright. And he had built a controversial sculpture. So it was this 6-foot tall plastic frame, and it had female body parts in it, like you have on a model airplane, where you break out the plastic pieces and you build your model airplane, gluing them together. Well, this was this 6-foot tall plastic frame, female body parts, and the title of the sculpture was Wife. So he's making a statement about objectification in our society and lack of appreciation and fungibility, trophy wives, whatever. All sorts of things that you could get out of this. And his show was going reasonably successfully, and then somebody came up and was like, oh, so you copied so-and-so, this Belgian sculpture. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? This is my work of art. And the guy says, well, one of you copied the other because this other guy in Belgium has the same sculpture.
He's like, I don't have a twin.
And it turned out that there was a Belgian artist that also had a 2-meter tall plastic frame, female body parts sculpture, different title, and the two next to each other weren't, it was the same idea, but they weren't identical sculptures.
Got it.
The parts were arranged differently. But the artists started yelling at each other, you copied me, no, you copied me. And
the guns are out.
It just turned out that they just came up with the same idea for the sculpture around the same time.
Yeah.
And they executed and exhibited around the same time.
It's like what we hear in music too, right? And it's just like, what happened with what was the outcome of
Well, so here's the thing. Copyright law, it's only a copyright violation if you copy. If you had access to something and you then made a copy of it.
So they were able to prove.
And so both of them, they're like, they talked to each other about their origin stories, and they couldn't find anywhere where they had any overlapping
We're gonna get
friends
to the
or
bottom of this.
so, like there was nothing in common. It was just the zeitgeist of the moment. Society's
Right.
consciousness had risen to this point where they both created something very similar. And we see that
Mm.
sometimes inventions, you know, all inventions are components put together. And sometimes the components that we put together were themselves inventions. Each component was an invention at some point in the past. We're building on the history of innovation. That's the whole point of the patent system, the whole point of the intellectual property system. Because going back to the US Constitution, it's to promote the useful arts and sciences. We want to encourage people. Fun fact though, useful arts, when the Constitution was written, refers to patents because useful arts meant engineering, and the sciences was like the science of writing, which means copyright.
Oh my God. That
So,
would probably blow.
so it's like crypto. Crypto in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
80s means something different than crypto in the 20 teens.
We're all the same. We're just producing shit.
So I mean, the IP system exists to promote creativity.
I love this part because, as we know, the pro entrepreneurship side of things, um, it is a small world. It's small, it's a bit lonely. There's a lot, not everyone is not extremely mainstream. And so like, you want to have camaraderie and at the same time, whether 80% of startups they fail. I think it's 80 or 90%. And and if you are working with each other or trying to learn from each other or trying to support each other, it's you basically laid out the landscape of a very different kind of competition, which I think is very separate to what to not what I don't want people to sorry, let me start again. I feel like you laid out perfectly what real competition really looks like in entrepreneurship rather than not being friends and being part of the community inside entrepreneurship in the community because having founder friends, for example, being able to talk business, being able to do business with each other, being able to support each other in a way if expectations and there's alignment there, or you're in the same season of something, and I really like that distinction because everyone should be supporting for other people to win to help our ecosystem and continuously inject in it. And I know you're not necessarily a CFO or accountant, but about this patent thing, I feel like, investors and founders should have like like some kind of budget plan to work towards. Like as part of their finance management, to go through the series of this to do something great and bring it out there. So do you have any advice there to in a way of like, I just feel like in the startup world, they're learning about so many different things. Finance is a black hole, marketing is a black hole, law is a black hole. So where would your advisory be in that?
So one of the reason our firm switched off of using the billable hour and moved to a purely fixed price model was so that entrepreneurs could make better financial decisions around their IP and they could plan their budgets ahead of time so they knew when to do it intelligently and when it made business sense to do so. So often we'll talk about...
You're sounding very responsible, Adam.
Well, so...
Help them be responsible.
So the patent system and also the trademark system offer some clear entry points, like when the time is ripe. And so, if it's if the startup that you're creating is important enough to leave your day job, I mean, there's a certain amount of financial commitment, a certain amount of budget that you've already put aside in your mind of it's okay, okay, this is the opportunity cost. I'm leaving this 9 to 5 day job to go do this risky thing. It must be worth more than the day job.
Right.
In emotional and financial value.
Yes.
So you've already built in a budget in your mind somewhat by doing that. And then there are tools where if we go the conventional funded startup route where we have maybe a friends and family round, an angel round, Series A, there's also ways that can mesh with both the patent and the trademark system. So after a Series A, doing a provisional patent application, which is going to be in the sub $10,000 range, is probably going to fit within the budget of a friends and family round. So you can protect that core idea. And that will give you patent pending protection for a year and preserve all your international rights.
Everyone's like, I'm going to put this in my pitch deck.
Well, which then allows you to go through your angel round.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to your angels, you say, look, we've already preserved our IP using this provisional. We're raising an angel round, and this portion of the angel round is reserved for the budget for doing our US filings and preserving our international filings by filing an international application. And then when you get to the Series A round, it's like, okay, so maybe 2 years has gone by. Well, it just so happens that in the international phase of the patents, it takes 2.5 years.
And that has to line up with market expansion too. So if they're even talking about that.
Right. So now they're talking with the VCs and they're saying, we're expanding our market internationally. We want to protect these international markets. We're going to need, so where the provisional was maybe $7,000-8,000, the non-provisional, the full US filing is on the order of like $35,000. Now we're going into international markets. We're going to need $200,000 budgeted to get this kind of protection in sort of the major markets around the world. Okay, so there's a way to grow the IP scope of protection and territorial protection that works reasonably well with fundraising timelines, but also gives you stopping points where, okay, we're not getting traction on this technology. We're going to pivot and do something else. You can let the provisional patent application go and not have spent $200,000 on the international side.
Series B, Series C.
Well, but if you're doing Series C and Series D, at that point you've built up a robust portfolio. It's not just, there's a term that we use in patent law called picket fencing. So a picket fence with one picket in the fence doesn't do much good, but if you have a whole portfolio with lots of boards on your fence, you can protect a huge area.
But we don't want to be talking about people who are entertaining fire sales either, because then...
Exactly.
Yeah. Gosh, this startup stuff. We love it so much.
We do.
Gosh, it's really showing.
Well, we have a saying in our firm that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And there's some very experienced entrepreneurs I know, but some of them are now very successful, but they had to get experience first. And they didn't get that experience by always getting what they wanted every time.
It definitely wasn't free.
Nope.
And without pain or suffering, I'm sure. Adam, thank you so much for having this really valuable conversation. It was so much fun. I'm just like, I love how you're able to storytell in a way that makes something so complicated, have a plot line and there is a destination too of like, oh shit, I don't think I want to go that way, or oh my gosh, I am totally going that way, or like I feel like people in our shared network, whether they're a investor, a advisor, a founder, I think this is going to really open their eyes of like, holy shit, which way are we going? Where are we going?
Well, if they have any questions, I'm always happy to make myself available and answer some of them.
Amazing. Thank you, Adam. And what is your email for people to email you a question to be like, give me 15 minutes of your time, please. We need it.
Well, if they just go to aeonlaw.com, so AEON law.com, so Aeon like Aeon Flux, they'll be able to find me there. And that's probably the easiest way. And I believe I even have a way to just link to set up a Zoom call with me right there. So they can get their questions asked very quickly.
Amazing, Adam. Thank you for your time again. And I'm so excited to like send all this to my friends, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I think with the different communities and sub-communities that we have, this is something that people should really take very seriously, of where the bet is and where they're going as active participants in the marketplace.
Well, happy to help them protect their spot in the marketplace.
Be a genius and walk through Adam's doors.
But don't be irritated at me. Be irritated at the problems.
Exactly.